Yeah, hi Rob. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thanks.
How does procurement typically get bonus?
If you're in a corporate situation, you probably don't. Genuinely try and understand what it is and listen to the subtlety. There's quite often it's wrapped in something a bit bigger.
What do you think is the biggest difference skill-wise between procurement and sales?
It's a great way to network, is to strategically, physically put yourself somewhere where you're a gatekeeper. Get finance, engineering, product development, the salespeople all in the same room together. We've got to save money on this thing. Where do we start?
Yeah, hi Rob. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thanks, Rich.
Really nice to be speaking to you on the
Yeah.
latest episode of Funnel Vision. You started, as I recall, straight into procurement
Yep.
and then moved into kind of C-level roles. So I think you've got some different perspectives for the audience we've got today,
Yep.
which is mostly sort of sales, sellers, sales leaders, etc. as well. So could you just give us a quick talk through of your career so far?
Yeah, sure. After school, I went to Manchester Metropolitan University,
Okay.
or Polytechnic. Just recently did a sustainability course at Cambridge University.
Okay.
I travelled the country for a few months just visiting Nissan up north. Peugeot used to be in the UK, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And as part of it, when I went round, I interviewed various people, quite senior people in the businesses. 3 of them basically said, apply for a job. Before I'd finished at Manchester, I had 2 offers, and being the mercenary of me, Ford were paying the most, so I went there.
Okay.
So I hadn't even finished my degree, and they said, come and have a job. And so it was nice to then have the summer off to know that I was walking straight into a job. I ended up.
So is that procurement for KPMG or going into companies like Ford and advising them on?
Going into companies and figuring, basically the typical remit was save them money.
Yeah.
Go in and renegotiate deals, think of cleverer ways of sourcing stuff. And if you're really clever, so the one thing that Ford taught me was it's all about value. So you can actually spend more money, but you get disproportionately more for your money than you did previously. So as an example, if you're buying, a particular component, if you bought the whole assembly, if you do it well, it's much cheaper to buy all the components together in an assembly than it is to buy all the individual components and put them together.
Got it.
So,
yeah.
And it's like value engineering, those kind of terms that they would use. So
Yeah.
that taught me a lot. So if you went into a smaller organization, so I did quite a few, I wouldn't say particularly small, but they're quite a relative to
Smaller than Ford. Yeah.
So the big household brand names. So I went into the quarrying industry,
Okay.
completely unrelated. Loved it. Did some great deals there, but improved the services, improved the quality of performance of suppliers. Not just about the money. Save them a stack of cash, but also solve some of their. Some companies just live with pain, and I'm like, hold on, we can fix this. Just get a new supplier or figure out a new process or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Fix all that and save your money. Win-win all round. So did quite a few completely different businesses. Interesting, I bought marketing services, media services, all sorts of, and again, I'm no expert on those. You have to learn pretty quickly to kind of get the nuances of the market that you're dealing with.
Yeah. So you covered like all categories over your career.
Yeah. Direct, indirect, negotiated property deals, because you look at things objectively. It's a bit like when I was doing the currency thing. I'm not a geek or about the currency. I'm just like, it's just the way that my mind works is understand it and then figure out the constituent elements of why it's working or not working. So with tech, I couldn't clearly understand the technical side of stuff, not interested in that. But quite often I'd end up choosing a supplier and a solution that the techie people couldn't come to the same conclusion because they were too involved, too close to it. And I'd sit there sort of almost stating the bleeding obvious. That doesn't seem to work to me. It doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah.
And everybody's sort of looking at each other going, he's right, But so it's just that way of breaking stuff down into small pieces and then putting it all back together and saying, I come up with a different answer. This is So I did just a mix, everything, touched everything, outsourced call centers, did all sorts of different bits and pieces.
When you go into a new assignment like that, is it the number one financial savings that you typically target, the biggest spend, or maybe what you understand to be the biggest problems?
I went into a print company, a couple of times I did print. The biggest spend they had was on the ink. So this is one
Right, yeah.
an outfit that does all the big magazines in the UK. It's a colossal amount of money spent on ink.
Yeah.
And the CEO said to me, leave it to me, I'll do that. I therefore said to them, look, I won't, we've cut a deal, we'll get savings on what you've asked us to do, but can I include the ink as a category? Because that's a massive spend, it was millions. If you can give me a couple of resource people from internally. So the CEO, he was a nice guy, he said, sure, I'll give you 4 plant managers so they all know their stuff. And but he said, I've already been offered £1 million off the price, so I'm going to bank that. It came back, and I ran that team separately from all the others. And those guys, really clever guys, but they'd never been through a procurement process before. So I guided them through this process. We ended up dropping nearly 4 million.
Really? Okay.
1 million of which we got as cash, as in a payment. So it wasn't even a reduction. It was like they had to cut a check there and then. So in terms of cash flow for the business, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, it's slightly ironic as well, isn't it, that a procurement supply chain consulting business overspent, isn't it? Really?
Is he?
I appreciate his personality.
It was, yeah. And I think you get one of those situations, and if you've ever run a consultancy, I mean, you're clearly doing
do it now. Yeah,
it's feeding the monster. You got to keep the money coming in, and you miss one client, or somebody pulls out, or you get a dud deal, and suddenly you're up. Your cash flows in a real mess. So and I think he thought he cracked it. I think he just thought, I'm just everybody I talk to will turn into a deal, and subsequently started again. But yeah, that was quite an interesting experience for me. We hadn't even got a bank account. We got our first payment, and they were like, "We're going to pay you," but we had all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that probably leads to what you're doing now, isn't it? Because that seems like that was very much a kind of a troubleshooting role. Maybe just explain briefly what you're doing now, and then.
So that did lead me into. I left Virgin because kids come along, and being in Manhattan, there's no sort of immediate family around. So I started up again on my consulting stuff, and I went into a company. They'd said we've got to renegotiate some contracts. We made a mess of it. It's causing us some financial problems. And I went in there, looked at the contracts, and I said, I can redo the contracts, renegotiate them. But I said, this is tip of the iceberg. You've got problems. Yeah. As in the business is fundamentally the culture, the financials, the products, everything. This is just a symptom of you've ended up here because of the way the business is running. So the guy who'd founded the business literally put his head in his hands. He's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, so I went in there I was consulting, but I went in there on a PAYE, on on a fixed term, and took me about 18 months. And I went through everything: sales, marketing, products, so technically products, and just redid the whole thing to get the business back in the black, and cash flow, put some money in the bank, some reserves. Did that for them, hit all the numbers, hit what I was asked to do. And then one of their clients, one of their customers, who'd had a really pretty poor experience, the owner of that business, he rang me up and said, I saw what you did, because they were on the receiving end, as in their experience improved.
Yep.
He said, we need some help. Can you do the same for us? So I did exactly the same. I went in there, and I just look, you just ask lots of questions of everybody. I always park myself outside the leadership offices, so I don't go and find some kind of precious office myself. I'll literally, so nobody can walk past. So it's quite good to sit by the front door, so nobody can walk past without me seeing them and saying, hello, who are you? What are you here for? Who are you here to see? So you get to see all the traffic that's going in and out of the CEO's office or the CFO's office. So you meet everybody. It's a great way to network, is to strategically, physically put yourself somewhere where you're a gatekeeper. Okay. And of course, then I can join up lots of conversations and figure out what's going on. When you start talking to someone who's running a certain part of the business, it might be compliance or something.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And then you join the dots, and then suddenly something comes up, and you can broker the discussion or the relationship or whatever internally, and then that it comes across to clients. I think clients pick up on whether a team is gels together or not, whether a business is one business or whether it's different bits of the same business, all that stuff. So
Okay.
So that's been kind of where I am now. Yeah.
That's interesting, and I think, fairness, Rob, you've what you've described in many ways from like a good procurement person is actually very similar to a good salesperson in terms of problem solving, troubleshooting, getting things done, fantastic networking, etc. I'd like to spend a bit of time on the procurement process and your experience of sales as well, because I think you're obviously sitting on both sides of the fence in the current role.
Yeah.
Maybe just start with like, what are the top 3 traits that a good procurement person needs to have?
To me, I think being really open-minded, objective about stuff, because so many people are, to my advantage, too quick to come to conclusions, too quick to think they figured it out.
Yeah.
And I think it's allowing data, information, just knowledge to lead you to where you're supposed to be. And actually, on a procurement, on a consultancy basis, I think I have to warn customers that it's going to feel a bit random at times because I'm just absorbing, and they expect, we're going over here and we're going to achieve this and save this. And I'm like, I don't know if we are yet.
Yeah.
I've got to figure out, you've asked me to solve a problem or save your money. I haven't quite understood where you are today to get there. So I think being quite open-minded and objective, and trying not to conclude too quickly, because invariably you'd be wrong, or you're suboptimal. You'll end up kind of the right conclusion, but you could have done far better. So that's a really important part of the skill. The communication, just enjoying talking to people, and I'm genuinely really interested in what people have to say and why about anything. Doesn't matter if it's work or not. It's so that helps. I mean, you can work on it, but if you're not naturally kind of comfortable with that and just kind of interested in what people do in their spare time or stuff like that, or why they're, it's going to be a bit of a struggle. So I think you have to be quite people oriented.
Yeah.
And I think so those are a couple of things. I think just being commercially savvy. So if somebody's working for me and they're trying to build their experience, I tend to sort of say, ignore everything around you. If it's your business, if it's your money, if it's your house at stake, what would you do? What would your decision be? And it kind of focuses the mind in terms of, if there was nobody else here to make the call, would I be as liberal with my money? Because it's company money, it doesn't matter. But actually, if it was mine, would I be a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more challenging in terms of some of the questions I'm asking and stuff like that? Would I be happy with the result and the outcome? So I think that's quite a personal thing, but I tend to, it's quite useful, and dealing with people. So that's the other thing. I've had to make quite a lot of people redundant in my time.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure every one of them would talk to me now, and like, that was fair. And most of them would have left with a position to go to, because you get people it's stressful. They might not be the right people. So all that 75% that got transitioned out of that business, guarantee none of them left without having something to go to.
Yeah.
I gave them, I'm probably deviating from legal requirement of making somebody redundant, but there'd be a fairly subtle, this probably isn't going to be your future. You might want to start making, plans. So there's a sensitivity around people. And I think it may translate to sales, but certainly from a procurement perspective, if you're going to take a lot of cost out of somebody, that could be quite embarrassing for them in their organization. Their job could be in jeopardy. So you've kind of got to help them spin it into a way that they can sell it back to their organization.
Yeah.
Make them look good. I'm doing a lot of that at the moment. I've got a lot of people who are internally in their own organizations. They're the customers. But you can tell that if I help them look good in terms of their own business, they're going to be advocates for me. They're going to want to stay with the company I'm working for because I've helped them
Yeah.
get over a hurdle. So there's a lot of that to it. A bit more. You can be hard nosed. You can hit people over the head and just say I can get it cheaper elsewhere, but it's kind of short term gain.
So just with what you've said, like you've probably named what I would classify as sort of 6 or 7 personality traits are obviously important for procurement.
Yeah.
But if I was to name 6 or 7 for sales, I would probably go good at questioning, discovery, curiosity, great at communication, networking, commercially savvy, high emotional intelligence, etc. I think everything you said is exactly the same. So I'm trying to think, what do you think is the biggest difference skill-wise between procurement and sales?
I mentioned you before we started talking on this, but so the last couple of years, one of the businesses I've been with, their average order value is about $3,000.
Okay.
And the market shifted, and it's like we need to get away from. I mean, it's good, but it's not good enough. We need some bigger ticket orders. So you have to go into the commercial market, the kind of the big B2B as opposed to B to small b, that kind of stuff. And so I managed to land in a fairly short space of time from going from 0 to I'm actually selling now.
Right. Yeah.
3 6-figure contracts back to back, big. For me, were like the first one was just over $100,000, second one was 250, and then the third one was nearly 600.
Right.
And so one PO for whatever 250 grand versus one for $3,000.
$3,000. Yeah.
And I'm like, I haven't changed anything about me in terms of the way I approached it. I think the skills in terms of are there differences? I think what happens potentially is that if you're called a procurement person, you put that label on and you then behave like a procurement person. And therefore, perhaps you almost work to a type of behavior or a personality that you think is appropriate for that job. And I see that quite often where I see someone's skill set and I'm like, they're in that role, but actually their skill set is really transferable to something else.
Yeah.
So
it's
I think
taken you till now to realise you're a good salesperson.
Yeah, no,
as well,
honestly.
then.
Well,
Yeah.
and as procurement, you've been selling because quite often you're going in and you haven't got a lot of money to spend.
I think it's what we're needing. A lot of the skills are very similar, aren't they? And the
Very
discussion.
similar.
Yeah.
Is there any difference? I think it's probably to do more with confidence. I think if you're procurement and you're in procurement in a big company, you tend to have a name and a lot of money to spend. So I think a lot of procurement people, to be quite frank, get a disproportionately. They think they're better than they are because they've just got a lot of money to spend, and actually, the suppliers are wise to that. They kind of suck up to it, but actually, the individuals aren't necessarily that good.
Yeah.
I'm a bit cynical about it, but when you see really good procurement people, they don't behave like that. They are pitching, they're selling. This is the reason that you need to give me a better deal. You need to, and what I can give you in return, type thing. So I think those are the skills that are the same. I'd struggle in some ways to find the difference. Apart from the labels tend to affect people's personal. You drop into that.
The salesperson's job is to help somebody buy, and I guess a procurement's job is to help a company buy. So there is going to be clearly quite a lot of kind of overlap. I'm just interested to understand a bit about. You mentioned before about assessing value, bringing in factors from all of the business. Could you just explain, like, if you're buying something significant, what process a business goes through to kind of build up its selection and decision criteria, and how it weights them from a procurement perspective, and perhaps even like how important price is a factor, because you always hear it's all about price, and I don't actually believe that's the case. So you could perhaps elaborate on that as well.
Price is sort of way down the track. So I think in terms of if you're going to buy something, as in a service or a product, you've got to do your homework in terms of what it is that you're buying, as in your own specification, your own brief. What do you really want? And again, there's a level that says the bleeding obvious. I've got to buy these components. It's really, it's just a PO for XYZ, but is it really? I mean, that's the basic bit. You've then got to, like, well, where's the quality? Where's the account management? Where's the data? Where's the what happens if it all goes wrong? What's your contingency?
Yeah.
Are you buying with those kind of levels in your mind? And I think so. It's really, again, it's not being a technical expert in whatever you do. So I bought media space and TV advertising and stuff. I know nothing about it, really, but it's
Yeah.
just understanding what are the bits in the marketplace that influence whether somebody is keen to sell to you or not. So you might have a fairly small spend, but you could be really interesting to a particular supplier
Yeah.
because they may say, well, and that's really the trick, is to try and look at it from their perspective. They may well say, it's not a big sale, but actually that opens a door. That gets me into other markets. This is always something new, or it gets me into a brand name that I like, or
Okay.
it may be a personal thing. We're back to the personal. It might be, I need a quick win. I need to show that I've got a new account on the books. You're looking for all the kind of really the things that the sales individuals are really interested in terms of what is it that turns them on.
Yeah.
And therefore, and also, and then you can flip it on its head. What's the risk if they don't do this, if
Okay.
they don't close the sale, or they don't maintain the customer? What's the downside? And it's usually starts off quite a personal thing, and then clearly it's a bigger organizational thing. But I tend to work on the basis of have a very clear remit of what you're trying to buy, time frames, or what's the really sensitive stuff to you, and then ultimately you get to the price. So you've got to then understand your pricing inside out. A lot of organizations, they'll have prices already set by somebody else. Tech is a really good one. You brought that up earlier. Tech, because a lot of people provide the same software, the same licenses for similar products. Really interesting to me is like everybody's ended up all kind of eating from the same trough, and they all end up at the same price point. There's maybe no rationale for it. There's no cost base to it. They've all, and I usually go in there and I'm kind of like, I've got to prove this. Is this genuinely what it should cost? Have they really, supplier A, B, and C, they're all supplying within a couple of quid of each other.
Yeah.
But they all may be hundreds of pounds off in terms of the true market value.
And there's a few qualification questions that I personally like and would maybe coach or have used lots of times. Have you got a favourite question that perhaps helps determine that, or maybe even from the disarming the salesperson perspective?
But I do tend to like to understand people a bit.
Yeah.
As in, not in a cynical way, but it's quite. I'm just genuinely interested in people, so ask more about. Maybe it's like their career, or I don't tend to get into family stuff, but what do they enjoy, football, sport, and stuff like that.
Okay.
And that just that kind of then not on the opposite side of the table, they're more on your side of the table. You start to build, and you can quickly judge, I think, depending on how people talk about stuff like that, how comfortable they are, how much they, are they just trying to pitch and sell to you, as opposed to actually this could work, as in we could.
There's a bit of a human connection.
Yeah, there's
sort
a
of
human
thing,
connection, and of course that always works when there's the initial sale, but a year in, 2 years in, things aren't going so well. You can have a much more open conversation, more candid about stuff. And
yeah,
I'm struggling. I need to get some more money off. How do we do this?
Okay.
As opposed to, I've got to hit you over the head, and because I don't like you. It's more a case of, let's be collaborative here. Let's figure out how we can, all your businesses, you're always showing up late. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
And it depends. I've just got one recently where they're a marketing company, and the person they put on the account was just not up to it, and I subtly had to kind of, you need to take them off the account. It's your choice, but actually it's influencing ongoing relationship and how much I'm prepared to spend with you, because you that person doesn't get it or not up to spec. So
Yeah, no, I fully get that, and I think, in fairness, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's changed in sales the last sort of 5 or 6 years, particularly, is that people are in sales for a long-term career. You only get opportunities with customers or organisations once, and if you can build long-term relationships, you can go back and build long-term relationships even with other companies and so on in the future, which I've done and many other people have
yeah,
done in the past. And it's really quite powerful. I'd one question which you might have almost just answered it, but if you must have seen thousands of salespeople. If you were to give them like one tip, what would that be?
I just think it's the usually the ones that I find difficult and turn me off are the ones who are. It's almost overconfident in what they've got, especially if it's maybe a well-known product or brand or something like that.
Right.
It's just that human thing again. It's just like, just engage well and ask lots of questions. I mean, that's clearly an obvious sales thing, but genuinely try and understand what it is that, and listen to the subtlety, because it's not always about I need this and this and this. There's quite often it's wrapped in something a bit bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like when I moved that stuff for Jaguar around the reason I moved it to Japan is because the salespeople from that company, they not only solve the technical issue, great, number one, but they could tell I had time pressures and all sorts of stress.
Right.
And they asked lots of questions, and they flew everywhere to visit people. And so they just made my life so much easier, because I'm not, and genuinely, I'm like, the fixing the product is probably the easiest bit. It was the whole, don't ask me enough questions or ask everybody enough questions that you've got a good enough picture of how you're going to fulfill the order and whatever it is. So that was really important. So that's a good tip, just to make sure that you're crystal clear on what is trying to be achieved. Don't we're back to that other bit about don't come to conclusions before you've really understood. It's so easy just to be flippant and complacent about it.
How does procurement typically get bonused or KPI'd?
So procurement, if you're in a corporate situation, you probably don't. You're probably there, and that's your income. And I think that's a big bugbear of procurement people,
Right.
especially in a big corporate. Why do the salespeople get incentives?
Yeah.
Procurement, you might go in and you might cut a deal and save 20% on something, and they just say thanks very much, well done for doing your job.
Yeah.
So that's my experience, is that there's a sort of almost slightly frictional relationship between procurement people and sales, but in the same organization.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, I can have a direct impact on the bottom line and prove it, but I get nothing.
Yeah, I can save $1 million over here, whereas you sell $1 million. Ratio is
so that for
different.
me. I ended up in the States, loved it, but I never saw anything. Now, if I'd have gone out and sold $1 billion worth of $500 million worth of sales, I'd have been made up. I mean, literally. So, I think.
Is there KPIs or other? Are they quite formal around that?
They're usually really quite formal. I mean, literally measuring everything to the date you do stuff. Whatever it is, January the 1st, your price is here. By this date, you've got to have the price below this level. So a sophisticated organization will be tracking that, and there's all sorts of software and methods to do it. I think KPIs and measurement, it's fairly straightforward. I think when you get into value propositions, I'm going to spend more. That's the most clearly challenging one, potentially.
Right.
You might save money over there because you've spent more over here, and then proving that physical goods, products are much more easily tangible, but services and stuff like that, how do you prove that? I mean, I bought PR before. It's a nightmare. How do you prove that PR works?
I can imagine that's a bit less tangible. But say, like you were saying before, around kind of parts for, I'm going to really simplify it, but parts for an engine or the engine assembled together. Is that like typically a procurement's role to say, I've got this option here, which is X amount of pounds for all the parts and then Y for all the assembly, or we can get it all together and make a case
Yeah.
for a kind of complete proposition.
And that's a real team effort. So that's literally. So when I was at Ford, and this is part of the fantastic way they used to do stuff, and most companies could benefit from it now, is a cross-functional collaborative approach that says get finance, engineering, product development, and the salespeople all in the same room together. We've got this, say it's an engine, we've got to save money on this thing. Where do we start? What do we do? What can we, like I said, if you bought assemblies, could we do it cheaper? Technically, are you guys okay with that? What's the problem if we do that? From a, even from an aesthetics perspective, the sales, the marketing team, it's going to look ugly. Does that matter? It's hidden by and it's amazing how sensitive all that is.
Yeah.
Now they cover it all in plastic, but it's so the ability, so it's like most of these things, that's almost impossible to do on your own, but doing it collaboratively, get people who understand the product, the way it's made and built, and say, look, if I didn't buy all these little bits together and have a bunch of people sticking them together, and I got a supplier to do the whole thing, is there a saving? What happens to the quality? Does it go up or down? All this sort of stuff. What happens to they've now got control over IP, potentially, all this sort of stuff. So it's a melting pot. But Ford had a couple of programs when I was there. Had a thing called 10% reduction in 2 years across the board.
Right.
And it ended up being, we did it in 14 months. And
Okay.
purely because you value engineered stuff. Do we need to, this process in the, there was a thing, some of the components, they had a cleaning process, and you're like, why does it need to, is it just aesthetics or whatever? And you get a consensus, everybody says, well, no, it's always that's just been part of the process. Take it out, there's an X quid off the process there. So you wouldn't have been able to do that on your own, but you have to get the buy-in.
Okay.
So it's so that's the value engineering side of it, the kind of looking at the holistic type price.
If I can ask you, what's your favourite deal, but from a buying perspective ever?
I think as a complexity of deal is the engine's bottom half of the engine, moving it.
Right.
Sort of, in theory, it was a done and dusted, and I was just overseeing something somebody else had done, and it ended up being a potential disaster and a nightmare. And then not only financially getting that on, but time-wise, and there was a lot of, I was probably slightly naive because I was quite young. I enjoyed it, but there was a lot of senior execs who were clearly very stressed about how that was going to end up.
Yeah.
I had everybody I needed at my disposal. I'm like, if we can't do this, everybody was fully committed. They just needed somebody to kind of, they weren't going to carry the can. I was the one kind of like, I'm prepared to stick my neck out. But
yeah,
I'm sat there in meetings, and they're the ones figuring it all out. They seem to be really engaged, and that's kind of what gave me the confidence, I think. I'd have probably run a mile if I didn't sense that. Yeah. So that to me was a big
favourite.
Yeah.
Okay. No, cool. And I think just to finish, you must have seen like so many different salespeople, had so many like buying experiences. You must have a couple of like amusing anecdotes. What's maybe been your sort of funniest experience?
Oh yeah,
that you could share.
Yeah, there's one. There was a buyer there, really old school, and we had to save money. And this guy gets the representative from the supplier, the sales guy, sits him at his desk in a very open plan office.
Yeah.
And the buyer just sat there like this, old guy. And he just said to him, 20% off. That's all he said. And the guy was like, I can't do that, I can't do that. There's no money in it. I was explaining it forever and ever. And then there was a pause, and he goes, 20% off. and it just like, and we were all listening into this. And then the buyer suddenly hits his dial thing on the phone, and you could hear it ring. He put it on speaker. This guy picks it up and goes, "Oh, John," he goes, "I need to talk to you about your pricing." He goes, "Oh, isn't Thing there with you? Our sales rep's with you."
Yeah.
And he like this, and he literally went, He went, yeah, but he ain't listening to me. It was brilliant. It was just like, it was such a bad way to handle it. He literally just, and the guy was just dying, absolutely dying.
That's a funny one, yeah.
So yeah, that was entertaining, but it was also, to me, it was like, I'd never do that.
Rob, thank you very much for your
Not at
time.
all,
I
Richard.
really enjoyed having the discussion. It's nice to catch up again, and I think there's a lot of interesting insights
Hopefully.
for this episode of Funnel Vision.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Richard. Cheers.